Imagine standing on a wooden platform, your hands tied behind your back, a white hood pulled over your face. Below you, 1,500 soldiers stand in absolute silence, bayonets fixed, watching your every move. You are not a general. You are not a politician. You are a failed businessman, a debtor, and a farmer. But the state of Virginia says you are a monster. The newspapers say you are a lunatic. And millions of people in the North say you are a saint sent by God. In 10 seconds, the trapdoor will open. In 10 seconds, you will die. But you know something the soldiers below you don't. You know that the moment your neck snaps, the entire country is going to burn. To understand the blood that was shed in 1859, we have to understand the eyes of the man who shed it. John Brown was not a normal man. Even his friends described him as having a gaze that could pin you to the wall, eyes that burned with a terrifying, metallic intensity. He was born in 1800 into the hard, rocky soil of Connecticut, raised by a father who believed two things with absolute certainty: that God was real and that slavery was the unforgivable sin against him. While other children were playing, John Brown was memorizing the Bible. While other young men were looking for wives, John Brown was swearing oaths. There is a story, perhaps legend, perhaps fact, that when John was just a boy, he saw a slave boy his own age being beaten with an iron shovel. The sound of that metal hitting flesh didn't just scare him, it broke him. It rewired his brain. He grew up failing at everything he touched. He tried farming and failed. He tried tanning leather and failed. He tried land speculation and went bankrupt. By his 50s, he was drowning in debt lawsuits and the mouths of his many children. To the outside world, he was a nobody, a drifter, a crank. But inside his head, a voice was getting louder. He began to believe that his failures in business were actually signs from God. God didn't want him to be a rich merchant. God was stripping away his worldly distractions to prepare him for his true purpose. He stopped praying for slavery to end. He started buying guns. The spark came in 1854. The U.S. government passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, allowing the settlers of the new Kansas Territory to vote on whether they would be a free state or a slave state. It was supposed to be democracy. Instead, it was an invasion. Thousands of armed men from the South, known as border ruffians, flooded into Kansas. They rigged elections, burned down houses, and terrorized anti-slavery settlers. Then they sacked the town of Lawrence, burning the hotel and destroying the printing presses. John Brown hurried to Kansas, his wagon loaded not with farm tools, but with rifles and broadswords, heavy two-handed artillery swords. When he heard about the burning of Lawrence, something in John Brown finally snapped. He told his sons, something must be done to show these barbarians that we, too, have rights. On the night of May 24, 1856, the old man, as his sons called him, made his move. This was not a battle. This was a horror movie. Brown, 4 of his sons, and 2 other followers crept toward Pottawatomie Creek. They didn't go for the soldiers. They didn't go for the politicians. They went to the isolated cabins of pro-slavery settlers. They arrived at the cabin of James Doyle. They ordered Doyle and his 2 adult sons outside into the darkness. Doyle's wife, Mahala, begged for her husband's life. Brown simply stared at her, his face like stone, and pointed to the door. They marched the men into the darkness, a few hundred yards from the house. And then the swords came down. They didn't just kill them, they butchered them. They hacked their heads and chests. They cut off hands. It was brutal, intimate violence. They went to another house, Alan Wilkinson, dragged him out in his nightshirt, killed him. They went to a third house, William Sherman, hacked him to death in the riverbed. 5 men, dead. When the sun rose over Kansas the next morning, the political debate was over. The Civil War had technically already begun. Brown had washed his hands in the creek, convinced he had done the Lord's work. He looked at his son, who was shaking from the horror of the night, and said, "If a man stood between you and the dragon, would you not cut him down?" After the massacre, Brown was a wanted man. He went into hiding, moving between the shadows of the North and Canada. But he wasn't hiding to escape. He was hiding to plan. He began to visit the wealthy elites of the Abolitionist movement in Boston and New York. These were refined men, poets, philosophers, millionaires. Men like Frederick Douglass and Henry David Thoreau. Brown would sit in their parlors, wearing his rough, worn-out clothes, and speak with a hypnotic power. He didn't tell them about the hacking of the bodies in Kansas. He told them about glory. He told them about a sword of Gideon. He convinced 6 wealthy men, known to history as the Secret Six, to fund a private army. His plan was sheer lunacy. He would take a small group of men to Harpers Ferry, Virginia. He would capture the Federal Armory, which held 100,000 rifles. He believed that the moment he took the armory, the news would spread like wildfire. He believed that thousands of slaves from the surrounding plantations would rise up, run to Harpers Ferry, take the guns, and form a massive army of liberation. He would then march this army into the Appalachian Mountains, creating a Black Republic within the South, a fortress of freedom that would destroy the economy of slavery from the inside out. Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist orator, met with Brown in a stone quarry to discuss the plan. Brown begged him to join. Douglass looked at the old man and shook his head. He told him, "You are walking into a perfect steel trap. You will not get out alive." Brown smiled. He didn't care about getting out alive. October 16th, 1859, a Sunday night. Cold rain is lashing down on the Maryland Bridge that leads into Harpers Ferry. John Brown puts on his cap. He looks at his army. It is pathetic. 21 men, 16 white, 5 black. 3 of them are his own sons. They have a wagon full of pikes and rifles. They cross the bridge in silence, cutting the telegraph wires. The town is asleep. At first, it works. They overpower the single night watchman at the armory. They take the rifle works. They take the bridge. In less than an hour, John Brown controls the weapons of the United States Army. But then the chaos begins. A train approaches the town. Brown's men panic. In the confusion, they fire at a figure in the darkness. The man falls. When they check the body, the irony is sickening. The first man killed in John Brown's war to free the slaves is Hayward Shepherd, a free black man who worked as a baggage handler. The train escapes and speeds to the next station, tapping out a frantic telegraph message. Insurrection at Harpers Ferry. Send troops. By morning, the town of Harpers Ferry is awake. Farmers and shopkeepers grab their own guns. They surround the armory. They start shooting from windows, from rooftops, from behind trees. Brown waits. He waits for the slaves to rise up. He looks to the hills, expecting to see hundreds of men running to join him. He sees nothing but rain and gray sky. The slaves didn't know he was coming. There is no uprising. Brown is trapped. He and his surviving men retreat into a small brick fire engine house near the armory gates. The trap has snapped shut. Inside the engine house, it is hell on earth. The room is small, cold, and filled with smoke. Outside, hundreds of angry militiamen are drunk and screaming for blood. Brown's son, Oliver, is shot in the stomach. He falls to the floor, begging his father to kill him to end the pain. John Brown, still holding his rifle, looks down at his dying son and says, "If you must die, die like a man." Minutes later, Oliver is dead. Another son, Watson, is bleeding out in the corner. Brown stands in the center of the room, feeling the pulse of his dead son with one hand and holding his rifle with the other. He is calm. He is eerily, terrifyingly calm. Outside, the U.S. Marines have arrived. They are led by a colonel named Robert E. Lee. Lee sends a young lieutenant, J.B. Stewart, to the door with a white flag. He offers Brown a chance to surrender. Brown opens the door a crack. He tries to negotiate. He wants his men to walk free. Stewart steps back and waves his cap. This is the signal. The Marines use a heavy ladder as a battering ram. They smash through the doors. They rush in with bayonets. Brown is slashed with a saber, beaten over the head, and knocked unconscious. The raid is over. The Black Republic lasted less than 36 hours. They didn't kill him, and that was the South's fatal mistake. If John Brown had died in that engine house, he would have been a crazy bandit. A footnote. But John Brown survived, and they put him on trial. For 6 weeks, John Brown lay on a cot in the courtroom, bandaged and bleeding, and he put the entire United States of America on trial. Reporters from every major newspaper in the country flocked to Virginia. They expected to see a raving lunatic. Instead, they saw a man of immense dignity. He wrote letters from his jail cell that were published in every newspaper in the North. He spoke with a clarity that haunted his accusers. He said, "I am worth inconceivably more to hang than for any other purpose." On the morning of December 2nd, 1859, he is driven to the gallows sitting on his own coffin. He hands a guard a small scrap of paper. On it, he has written his final prophecy. He writes, "I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away, but with blood." The trapdoor opens. John Brown dies. But in the North, church bells begin to ring. In Boston and Concord, they hold services for him. He is no longer a murderer. He is a saint. He is the first casualty of the war. Southern soldiers watching the execution look at the North's reaction and realize there is no going back. They want to kill us all. Less than 18 months after John Brown's neck snapped, the first cannons fired at Fort Sumter. The Civil War had arrived, just as he predicted. And as the Union soldiers marched into battle, to die by the hundreds of thousands in the mud of Shiloh and Gettysburg, they didn't sing songs about generals. They didn't sing songs about the president. They sang a song about the old man who hacked 5 people to death in a creek in Kansas. John Brown's body lies a-moldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on. So, we return to the question, was he a hero, or was he a terrorist? Perhaps the uncomfortable truth is that he was the only man who saw the situation clearly. He understood that a system as evil as slavery would not end with a vote. It would not end with a speech. It would only end when the cost of keeping it became too high to pay. John Brown was the check that America wrote to itself, and in 1861, the bank finally came to collect. What is your verdict on John Brown? Was the Potawatomi Massacre a necessary evil or a war crime? Let us know in the comments below. This is one of the most debated topics in American history. If you want to understand the dark roots of where we came from, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell. Next week, we are heading into the Sierra Nevada mountains to tell the story of the Donner Party, where a group of pioneers found themselves trapped in a frozen hell, forced to make the ultimate choice to survive. You don't want to miss it.